Welcome to the Saturday Night Live Afterparty. This week, we'll be discussing Season 46, Episode 2 of SNL with host Bill Burr and pinch-hitting musical guest Jack White. I'm Katherine Coleman, and I'm joined this week by Steve Finn and John Murk. If you'd like to connect with any of us, you can do so at snlpodcast.com. All right, here we go. So this is already proving to be a somewhat controversial episode. We had a big internet push to replace the musical guest because he wasn't taking the COVID seriously. Then we had a hot button monologue from Bill Burr. Mm-hmm. It's definitely being talked about.
See, I've been out of the loop. I've been doing family stuff all weekend. So I have not been on the Twitters. I have not checked the news. So I knew about, obviously, the musical guest replacement and all the fun surrounding that. But I didn't know how Bill Burr's monologue landed. So I'm going to be excited to get into that unless, we want to just tackle that right out of the gate.
No, let's save it. But I'm definitely excited to talk about it.
Okay. Good stuff.
Yeah. So quick little update here with sort of the ticket stuff we hit on last week. The ticket link never came back up this week, to my knowledge, and I have several things that are designed to let me know because I was looking forward to getting to go, but I ultimately didn't get to go, and really I have no idea what's going on with the tickets. I reached out to the standby girls. I don't think they really know what's going on with the tickets this week. It sounds like some people, maybe they pulled some people from last week's wait list, but overall, not sure, but I will keep trying to get into an episode to give a nice full rundown of what it looks like.
Yeah, I wonder if they did that first episode and realized the logistics of having enough people from the pool that they gathered. Because I'm sure once people win, then the reality of, oh, can I get into the city? Oh, I had to quarantine. I didn't know that. I guess I can't come. Or, like there's always people that just can't take advantage of the tickets they win in the lottery usually. Right. So I wonder if maybe they tested the waters to kind of see how easy it was going to be to gather the right group of people. And maybe they realized they got to retool a bit or just think a little bit more about their filtering process. Who knows? Or maybe just the expense of paying everyone to show up was getting a little burdensome on the production. So I don't know what's up. My sister was gung-ho about going because she's a first responder in New Jersey. And so it occurred to her that she might, be able to get to the head of the list there. But I think she may have missed her window since they haven't brought that link back. We shall see. If she does get in, I'll of course report back on that. But until we get something concrete, it's just one of those emojis.
Yeah. Hopefully they give us a little bit more clarity on that so we can report some good news.
Hopefully.
But enough on that. John, I think we have a little bit of listener feedback to discuss, right?
Yes, I'd love to jump into both of these. So first off, Matt Schroeder checked in and asked an interesting question that I don't think we've ever tackled on the cast before. So let's break this down. He says, I heard you guys mention in your review of the season premiere that SNL interwove the dress rehearsal footage and the live footage for the YouTube version in order to get the best of both takes. Do you think this is an ethical move to make sure online viewers are getting the best show possible? Or would you rather have the real unedited version preserved on the internet no matter how badly it played out on TV? All right. So are we purists? Is there any sort of moral dilemma to them tinkering with the show after the fact?
Yeah, I mean, I have sort of mixed feelings about it. I think there's definitely, like with last week's cold open, it suffered so much that I feel like it's for the best to change it out. Yeah. And it's not like they're altering jokes or saying, oh, that sketch didn't work and not posting it or something like that. So it doesn't bother me too much. Or with like something like Diner Lobster, I remember the live version, the song at the end got all out of sync.
Right.
And they replaced that. And so I think it's fine and it makes for a better rewatching experience in a lot of cases. But there is a part of me that wishes I could experience what I saw live again.
Right.
Because sometimes those little things are interesting or you want to look more into it. So I do miss getting to sort of relive that live experience.
Mm-hmm. What do you think, Steve?
Well, I think Mr. Schroeder, he used the words "no matter how bad it gets" or whatever
Right.
however he put it.
How
I
badly it
think
played out on TV. Yes.
yeah, how badly it played out. I think there is a cutoff point, and that's where I stand on the issue. I don't think that the cold open from last week's episode really merited that kind of editing because I don't think it really fully derailed it. Yes, there were some glaring mistakes there. It didn't bother me any more than any other charming little mishap that happens. What I agree with is when they replace sketches like when Leslie Jones walks off camera too early and has to come off and look in 10 different directions before she realizes what she's supposed to do. That kind of stuff that just makes you bite your knuckle. I think that is where we should be with re-editing or replacing either with dress rehearsal versions or just, re-editing the camera the camera angles. But I think, if the sketch doesn't crash and burn, yeah, maybe the purist in me would win over the perfectionist in me.
Okay.
And I think it's just got to go really bad before I agree with it.
Okay. My personal feeling is that for the first run, and I consider that East Coast and West Coast, I think it should be 100% as it went out of the studio the first time. Because I think everybody that stays up to watch the show, that stays up for the event of SNL, that wants to take it as the stunt of live television where anything could happen, I think they deserve those moments. Because, yes, even though it may totally trample a joke when, someone misses a camera cut or whatever.
Mhm.
Um, there is some charm to it for some of the viewers to be able to catch that and be like, yeah, these are real people doing this right now while I'm sitting here watching it on my couch.
Mhm.
And just like anytime you go to your local improv theater to catch a show, you never quite know what you're going to get, and sometimes it's a little awkward and a little fumbly, and that is in SNL's DNA in a way.
Mhm.
So I am a purist in that respect. I think that that has to go out for everyone. That's how I feel. So cleaning up the West Coast feed, I think there's I think there's a detriment to that because it also changes the conversation a bit. You've got two different sides of the country experiencing two different versions of SNL, and some people will never see it the other way or vice versa. So I would kind of like that first run to always be
Mhm.
true to what the show was when it went out. Then when you chop it up and you throw it on YouTube and you put it on the streaming services and you replace the music for licensing reasons and, pull out anytime a musical guest decides to rip up a picture of the Pope or whatever, like after the fact, when the show has to just remember, okay, well, we're a show and we have to make this the most bankable content we can for the long run, do what you want to do with it because the event is over. Now just, take your IP and capitalize on it however you want. So I feel like there's a place for both. For the people that want to DVR it and just for posterity always have that true experience, I want them to be able to access it regardless of which coast they're on. But on YouTube, I think just give us the punchiest comedy because at that point, people are tuning in to laugh. They're not tuning in for the event of SNL. They're pulling up a clip because they want to see a funny sketch. So
Right.
why give them
Mhm.
something that is less than what it could be with an extra 15 minutes of massaging? So that's where I stand. I am a purist. I want that to always live on and be available for people who appreciate it. But in the long run, I want them to be able to do whatever they want with their content to make the funniest stuff they can get out there. Matt Schroeder, and I hope we did justice to your question. We have one more piece of listener feedback that I want to jump into. This is from Neil Weinstein, who asks, enjoyed the season premiere immensely. Would like to know your thoughts on the continued MIA-ness, missing in actionness, of Melissa Villasenor and what that bodes for her SNL future. She's my fave, incredibly talented, and amazingly wasted. Neil Weinstein, you are not the only person to share those sentiments. Obviously, anyone on Reddit knows that there's a lot of Melissa love that flows through there. And yeah, so far we're 2 episodes in and not a whole lot of Melissa to be seen. Steve, you've had a long-standing crush on Melissa Villasenor. Are you heartbroken that you don't get to see as much of her as maybe you'd like?
Yeah, and I'm glad I have an opportunity to talk about it.
Good.
Because
Get your feelings out. This is a safe space.
we're 2 episodes in and we haven't had anything from her. It was her birthday this week.
Yes. She also has a music album out and could have easily slotted into a musical guest slot if for some reason, not that it would ever happen, they may have come up short on a musical guest.
Right. But here we are, 2 episodes in, and I mean, there's cast members who aren't even there in the studio getting more screen time than her. So, like, what the hell, man? I was kind of afraid of this. I must say, this is what I thought might happen once Chloe started to shine in her little vignettes of impressions, because that is a big part of what Melissa does, and she's very good at it. And it now seems that Chloe is the favorite go-to for the female impressionist. It was a hard role to fill. Noelle Wells, wasn't so successful there. Melissa, she has her moments, and I love it when she does her dirty talk sketches, and there's so much aside from just her impressions that I love about her, her performance. So, something's got to give. And hopefully, this is just like bad luck, and maybe she had sketches ready to go that were great. And I mean, we haven't had a 10-1
right
2 nights in a row. So this might be just bad luck on her part, and I hope for her sake that it's going to run out before the season's over.
Okay, Catherine, how you feeling about Mel V this season?
Melissa just seems like the most lovable, sweet, fun human being, and it makes me really sad that she's not being utilized. I don't know. I wish that we had like more inside information that like told us what happened. Like, was she in all 3 cut sketches? Which I doubt. It's so weird because there's plenty of roles that Melissa could play in any given episode, and they're just not being given to her for whatever reason.
So, to your point, Steve, she did come in obviously as an established impressionist, and we're assuming that's what the show was hoping to capitalize on in bringing her in a few years ago. But she very quickly transitioned from being the go-to impressionist to just being the quirky, sort of just like always up for whatever, just sort of like fun team player sort of player. Like,
Yeah.
she's not she's not really a scrapper. Like, she's not like digging and like politicking hard to like be at the top of the stack. I think she just likes going to work and hanging out and being there and just trying to bring a little bit of sunshine to everyone's day. That's the impression that I get. So I don't know if anyone has really looked at her as being the impressionist for quite a while, because a lot of what you see on the show isn't her impression. She did have that grab bag that they tried to capitalize on in the first couple seasons. But now, like, she does a Gaga, but it's more about the singing. So, when Gaga was in the news, they were capitalizing on her ability to really, really, mimic the music of that. And then instead of that kind of being her go-to, you see her do like her little Oscar rant song, white male rage or whatever it is. So they're just as comfortable putting her into things that capitalize on her talents, but not necessarily under the guise of an impression. And it seems like she has gotten as much of those fun, quirky, non-impression things thrown at her as they ever used her in an impression role. So because of that, I don't think that anyone looks at her that way anymore at the show. I think they just see her as Melissa. And sometimes you just need like a fun, goofy sidekick to kind of like, just look the right way in a sketch and, just have the right kind of, I don't know, just the right kind of quip to fill out a role. The problem is we have a really big cast. We have a very limited production, so they have to be more conscious of how much material they're producing and how they have people sequestered off working on things throughout the week. So for someone that isn't really at the top of the heap, as far as you are someone that can do anything, and we have all the confidence in the world in you just being able to lead anything, the Kates of the world and the Keenans of the world. If you're not that, I can see you getting lost in the fray a lot more, especially if you're just kind of happy go lucky and you're just kind of willing to let things play out how they're going to play out. And I just wonder if maybe her good nature isn't doing her any favors right now. So that's my headcanon on what's going on. But all that said, we look at Melissa, but we forget there's a lot of other people that we're not seeing a whole lot of either. And sure, maybe they've gotten to peek in on a handful of sketches, but there's a lot of people that haven't come to the top and really haven't like led a sketch that people are talking about the next day. We're only 2 episodes in. It's a weird season. It's a big cast. So she's not the only one that's kind of getting, lost in the mix.
Yeah.
So I'm going to reserve judgment. I'm going to say, let's just wait till Christmas and do kind of our cast report card at that point and see if it's been a trend or if it's really just the show figuring out how to deal with such a big cast, such limited opportunity, and such a weird production. So yeah, I don't know. I'm gonna hope for the best, but it certainly isn't encouraging how little we're seeing of her. I can certainly say that. All right, so I'm gonna turn this back to you, Catherine. Why don't you get us into our show proper?
All right, let's get into it. The cold open tackled the first vice presidential debate with all of its looks served and flies swatted, with cameos from Maya Rudolph and Jim Carrey.
Mm-hmm.
So, Steve, what did you think about this cold open?
Well, it's a bit of a mix from me because I'll start with what I liked. I liked that it had some kind of narrative to it. I felt like there was an evolving story. It had multiple locations. There was, some development there. It wasn't just this person behind this podium says something and then this person says something back and then they go back and forth and then it ends. This actually had some plot devices. There was a backstory to the fly that we saw at that debate. It was all really good stuff. Now, I did notice that a lot of people were already making these jokes and kind of talking about, oh, Jeff Goldblum should play the fly. Right. And a lot of this stuff was kind of accurately predicted among communities who enjoy the show. So they don't get points for originality from me when I see discussions online that become what they do on air. I don't feel very surprised when that happens. Having said that, I know we weren't going to see Jeff Goldblum because he's in that production bubble for the new Jurassic Park film. But, we got a very odd choice to make Jim Carrey do an impression. Inception, I guess you could call it. Being Joe Biden, doing Jeff Goldblum. It was very layered and quite interesting. But I just love the production design. Like they had a very convincing teleporter machine. They actually used footage from The Fly that was fun. And I mean, I think this one was just an improvement overall from our first cold open.
Yeah, that's like kind of the problem when something so iconic, so immediately iconic happens, like a fly landing on the vice president's head.
Yeah.
Everybody immediately has 6 ideas of what SNL is going to do with it, and no matter what they do, somebody's going to be disappointed.
Yeah.
I don't envy that. It's tricky. A lot of people were pushing for the fly narrative with the fly. I was hoping they were going to go a different route, so I was a little bummed about it. I was just really hoping for some really out of left field weird fly thing. So I didn't love the direction they went with the fly, but the first 7 minutes of the sketch, which by the way is already longer than most sketches should be, had this really grounded approach that I was really actually enjoying.
Mm-hmm.
It's always nice when you can go just crazy off the rails, but as we discussed last week, when reality is already so crazy, it's kind of fun when you can have a grounded take that's a little insane, and be able to really layer the jokes in. Like I loved the toilet paper joke. I loved the joke about Kamala's looks. So I was having a lot of fun with that, and then it went all over the place all of a sudden, and we had 6 more minutes of crazy fly stuff. So it was we'll just divide it into 2 sketches. One of them was a win and one of them was not for
Sure.
me. So yeah.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, it's tricky. I would definitely score this one higher than our premiere outing. I feel like
Yeah.
The vice presidential debate, I think it offered more meat, and I think that's probably what you were picking up on, Catherine. The fact
Mhm.
that there wasn't just so much yelling and cutting people off, that more was said during the debate. I think that probably lent itself for them to be able to lampoon some of, the actual positions of the candidates. Um,
Right.
Maya Rudolph's impression has improved significantly since last season. I wanted to drill in on that because she's picked up on a vocal quality of Kamala Harris where she almost sounds in her voice just a little bit like she's on the verge of crying. Like there's just a little bit of a little bit of just a very, just like slight thinness, or like a little rumble that comes up, that she's picked up on, and she's worked that into her vocal approach. And it's so effective because not only does she look a fair bit like Kamala Harris,
Mhm.
she's really dialing in on her mannerisms and her eyes, and this vocal quality, and how, now that we've seen so much more of Kamala, how she sells her lines during the debate, and how she has kind of just this sort of like smug, snarky, grinny sort of presence. Like there was a bit of an air of superiority that she was able to maintain throughout that debate that Maya was
Mhm.
born to do. And so
Mhm.
Maya picking up on that and really capitalizing on it to go a little bit more over the top was really effective. So I thought, performance wise, I think Maya owned this cold open. I really liked
Mhm.
what she was doing.
Definitely.
I think that they had more to say in the first half of this sketch, and then it just got super gonzo. And they, when you contract Carrie for 5 episodes, you got to do something with Carrie for 5 episodes. Um, I think they still don't really know what to do with their Biden, because again, he's bending time and space, and like, they're trying to give Jim Carrey like really, really absurd situations where he doesn't have to play Biden as tired and old. He can just sort of be Jim Carrey looking like Biden,
Mhm.
but doing Jim Carrey stuff. So obviously The Fly lends itself to that. It it had its moments, but it did feel really shoehorned and really like inevitable.
Right.
And it wasn't what I was loving about this. I think Maya Rudolph was the highlight. I think that this was a little steadier than our premiere outing, but overall, I still think, generally speaking, the show doesn't really know what they want to be saying about the current situation.
Yeah.
True.
Mhm.
All right. Well, it is what it is.
Mhm.
Let's move on to the monologue where Bill Burr towed that line of what's acceptable like he always does. John, what'd you think?
I liked it. It's interesting to be able to contrast this with what Chris Rock did last week, which I felt was a lot more tepid and felt a little shakier as far as, how tightly crafted the jokes were. And even the subject matter just felt more heavy-handed last week. I like Bill Burr's ability. He does what Louis C.K. did when he came on SNL, and that's intentionally try and lose the audience so that when you actually get to the point, you kind of pull them back in, because you say something that they're uneasy about and they're like, "Oh no, I can't get on board with this. I can't go down this path with you." And then he explains why he's saying such inappropriate things. Like the point that he's trying to make is usually sort of something you can get on board with once he's done making it. But for the whole rest of the time, you're just sort of squirming in your seat. And I really enjoy that kind of comedy where they try and pull you down the road with them, and see how far you'll come before you totally check out of it. And I felt that he did walk that line pretty good. I got a few solid laughs out of it, and by the end of it, I was glad that they pulled him in to do SNL, because I felt like he did what he does. He didn't water it down so much that it felt like he was sort of beholden to higher powers to kind of do a milk toast version of a stand up. It felt pretty true to what he does. And
Yeah.
I thought that he was smart too in the material that he touched on. He didn't go into some super risky territory. He just kind of knew what would work for an SNL audience. And I don't know, it worked for me. I thought it was pretty darn good.
Yeah, so I was laughing more than I was not laughing.
Good.
So
Well, that's a start.
I liked it. But I find that kind of like comedy and that whole approach to just be so needlessly exhausting.
Hmm.
It's fun for like 2 jokes in a set, and then I'm like, "Can we not? I don't wanna play this game with you."
Hmm.
And so but that said, I mean, Bill Burr, it really does it pretty masterfully.
Mhm.
Sometimes I felt like he went a little too far in the monologue. I don't feel like he always saved it. Which I'm
Was there any joke in particular where you're like, nope, I'm done with this one. I'll pick you back up on the next joke? Like, where did you check out?
He lost me on gay pride versus being enslaved.
But so this is perfect, because this is exactly where I feel like it's kind of a masterclass in that. Let me say something that is so obviously wrong that I'm challenging people to check out and not be willing to hear the punchline. Because when he gets to the punchline, he's really just advocating for Black people to not even get like second fiddle to gay people. He's saying like, it's not about gay people not deserving their month of pride, but let's not leave the Black people with February, which everyone can agree is just the worst month ever. So
Right.
if you're willing to go down that road with him, by the time you get to the punchline, you realize, oh yeah, it's not really like trashing gay people. He's just challenging you to be willing to wait for where he's going with it. And
Right.
that to me is so much fun. But I totally get why you're squirming the whole way there.
Yeah, I mean, I got the joke, like, but the whole like February Black History Month thing, like that's not a very original joke.
No, but to
So-
use it as a way to really put people on edge of like, wait a minute, am I going to have to start booing this guy? Like I don't know. There's something a little bit fearless about doing that in Studio 8H.
Fearless is a good word for you.
Yeah.
So I think this is going to kind of speak to my next thing, which is like the white woman joke, which when Michelle Wolf did it in her Netflix special, I loved it. Hilarious. Great content. Coming from a white dude that's just kind of mad at me for not taking as much of a fall as he is, it's not quite as good to me. And I know that's going to kind of get into this whole like, well, I can't say anything sort of debate, but it's just like not quite what it is. So like, I think there's something to be said for maybe the gay pride joke coming from someone else. Like, I don't think it was necessarily a terrible joke. Just like the white woman punchline was really good about like, sit here with me and take it. Like that. Ultimately, he won me back over. It was funny. It's what he does. But again, I don't know. I just find the whole thing so exhausting and tiring, and I just don't want to play the game.
Sure.
I guess that's ultimately what it comes down to.
Do we want to give Steve a chance to chime in before we?
Yeah. Do I have to raise
If we
my?
have to.
Do I have to raise my hand to get? Yes. You, Stephen. Oh, thank you. I think you are all doing just what Bill Burr wants you to do. This whole polarizing dialogue that's taking place right now. I'll just say it. You're letting Bill Burr win right now. You're letting him win. This is what he wants you to do.
But that's psychotic. Just saying.
Sure. But I mean, you're not wrong. I guess I got to get off social media because I was under the impression that you just would not be seeing this on television anymore at any time of day. Like, I just didn't think shows were going to go there anymore. And like, I get what John is saying. It makes you squirm until you get the point and you come back around and all that. But I just didn't think audiences these days had it in them to have that, okay, let's hear him out attitude. And I don't know, maybe that is the case. Like, obviously there are people taking to Twitter and whatnot to say that was in poor taste. And there are others that are not, it's pretty split down the middle. But yeah, even like when he started to turn on white women, I was like, whoa, okay. There was
We don't like that.
The Starbucks down the road from me just burst into flames in that moment. This was, I feel like I should just, respect the bravery to go out there and say that, because you're going to get chewed out.
Mhm.
Like, even if it's generally well received, there are going to be people that don't take this kind of humor well. And yeah, it's not for some, and other people enjoy it. And I am just intrigued by the fact that SNL is still willing to put that controversial material on air.
Yeah.
And this is what I was thinking ever since they announced Bill Burr, because I've seen what Bill Burr does when you put him on TV live. There's some great stuff to watch on YouTube where they just say, okay, we're going to go to commercial now, on those daytime talk shows that they've tried to have him on. I guess they didn't do their research. But yeah, I guess it's, say what you will about the material itself, but it's nice to know that this kind of polarizing, controversial material is still given a chance, regardless of what you think of it.
Yeah. So some of like what kind of sucks for Bill Burr is like his fans can be so obnoxious and terrible about it.
Right.
So like if I say I don't like a Bill Burr joke, like a lot of them are just like, "Oh, you're just triggered, you're offended." And I'm like, "Well, that's actually not quite it." But also like I think his fans don't necessarily do the best job of defending him or promoting him.
Well, Bill Burr fans are not Bill Burr.
Yeah.
Bill Burr has a very special talent, and yeah, you really got to be good at what you do to even attempt to do this and not look like a total pig.
Yeah. And I mean, and he is good at it. Like I said, I mean, he does it masterfully, and it's definitely a crafted thing that is, I probably wouldn't be able to do it. I definitely wouldn't be able to do it. So for that, I mean, yeah, I mean, that's what he does, and he does it really well. It's just not necessarily for me.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
My only other thought on the value of giving Bill Burr airtime on SNL is, I feel like culture tends to sometimes swing a little too far in any one direction. Like, we've had eras where conservative values have been overbearing to the point where they stifle culture and create serious problems in society. And then things can swing, the pendulum can go to the other side, and it can go too far to the point where progressive ideals start to stifle culture and creativity and art. And it's
the left and the right take turns with cancel culture.
Sure. And it's often best when the pendulum is swinging and it's getting to one of those extremes that you have someone challenge people to ask themselves, is it really such a terrible thing for us to be able to goof on some of this stuff? Like, do we really have to take all of this so seriously and assume that it's something that needs to be offensive and something that needs to be divisive? Because ultimately, what happens is when people invest in the ideas that there is so much separating us and so much, terrible things between us that are just irreconcilable, eventually culture gets to a point where people start rioting. Yeah. And sometimes I think it's almost, and I don't want to just read way too much importance into comedy, but sometimes I think it's important for comedy or art or whatever it is to challenge people to ask themselves, do we really need to look at things in such stark black and white, good, bad, evil, versus righteousness terms? Or is there a chance to just be a little bit human and pull back and laugh together? And as much as people might say that Bill Burr is divisive, I think that challenging the extremes of culture on either side often actually tempers things and leads to a bit more progress than the extremes will offer. So I feel that seeing this on SNL is actually a little bit reassuring to me that, there's still some pockets of culture that can offer that critique and that challenge, and just try and ask us, what do we really need to be focused on and what really needs to divide us? And I don't know. I don't think that Bill Burr's shooting that high, but I'd like to think that maybe, some good was accomplished by all this. So we'll leave it there, I guess.
All right. Well, let's get into our first sketch then.
Okay.
Jeannie and Don's brains have gotten confused from the isolation of this noon normal. Steve, how'd you feel about it?
It's a true to life sketch. And I don't care what your name is, you get thoroughly embarrassed when you realize that you've had this gap in general knowledge, and you could have an IQ of 1,000 and it'll still happen to you. So this is great universal humor that could be enjoyed by any class, any nationality, any gender. We all have those. The internalized embarrassment and anger is turned outwards in this sketch from our, I guess, isolated couple that have been in a bubble too long. So I think this was a really great premise to go with. And, with the live setting and the throwing of glasses and all of that, it really worked into a fun, enjoyable sketch.
Yeah, this was a fun sketch. Nothing heavy to it. Nothing, no real like intellectual, like comedy value to it. It was just a simple, fun sketch, and I love that about it. I love the character that Keenan plays in these sketches. Because there's sort of a theme. Like we've had a lot of sketches that are similar to this. So, most notably and recently, I believe, like the Weezer sketch, where you have like a crazy person and then like a couple other couples. And in that sketch as well, Keenan was kind of like the person of like, oh, please don't bring this up.
Right.
And it's so fun, and he does it so well.
He's the don't go there guy.
Right.
Mhm.
Kate sold this one really well. She's good at being crazy, and she likes to be physical, so like getting to kick the wings, I imagine, was very fun for her.
Mhm.
But yeah, so this one, nothing to really critique. It was just fun. It was a good time, and I liked it.
Oh, I got critiques. I think it was a really fun idea, very relatable. We can all instantly put ourselves into a situation where we put our foot in our mouth and you're just kind of sitting there stewing on it. Everyone else has moved on. It's not a big deal, but to us, we just can't quite let it go. It's just, us, the internal embarrassment that can just stew, eventually is going to bubble over. So that's great. That's a fantastic place to start exploring. My criticism of this is I feel it escalated way too soon. I feel they basically got to the point where they're throwing glasses and kicking chicken wings before they really went down that road as far as I wanted them to. And then once they did that, I don't feel they had anywhere to go. They just basically had to sort of like mea culpa, and everyone had to reassure them. And then, there really wasn't much else to it. So I feel like maybe just structurally, I think this was maybe paced a little odd, or maybe there was a second beat to that joke before maybe they got to the point where they're really wigging out and it's all coming to a head. Like if Will Ferrell was doing the sketch, I feel like he could have stewed in his juices for another minute and milked some screen time, and like, really like they could have just got close on him and you just see you kind of just see it bubbling over. And so like, I think there was some ways to draw out this comedy a bit more than what they did.
Right.
But still a great starting point, a great idea, and fun words that they found to goof on. So, there was some joy to be had. I just wasn't left totally satisfied at the end.
Yeah. If stewing is what you're after, maybe Heidi would have been a great choice as the wife as opposed to Kate.
Possibly.
When it comes to stewing, I think Heidi is the crock pot of the cast.
Sure.
She's
you're not going to sell Catherine on cutting Kate from a sketch. So I can tell that you're speaking some controversial ideas right now, Steve, but
sure.
I'm always game to see Heidi in a role that allows her to kind of dig deep and just sort of simmer and let the performance kind of come out of her face a bit more rather than in the dialogue.
So interestingly, you could easily sell me on replacing Kate McKinnon in this sketch.
Really? Okay.
In a weird turn of events, this was one where I think she did a great job. Like I said, she sold it. She simultaneously made the sketch for me, but I'm also willing to see someone else in it because she also did that thing where she was just breaking just a little bit the whole time.
Yeah. See, I had some thoughts on that in one of our earlier casts, where I was saying, she's so late in her tenure that maybe she doesn't feel like she really has to work as hard in these sketches. And so maybe you're picking up on a bit of that.
Yeah, so I think I was still on the it's endearing and she's perfect train, and now it's getting to the point where it's still endearing and she's still perfect, but also I sort of did start to think, it's time, and I feel comfortable with saying someone else can be in this role.
That's real progress. That's real progress. This is a breakthrough.
That I just said that.
No, it's okay.
Face turned red.
You've got the talking pill. It's a safe space. No, that's very interesting.
It is what it is.
Yeah. As I was watching the sketch last night, I thought, I bet Catherine's just eating this up. And I wasn't quite as in love with them, going nuts there. But I just assumed, this is an over the top Kate performance. I thought it would be your cup of tea. And it's just interesting that, you can see that there is life beyond Kate McKinnon in some of these roles.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. It's a real breakthrough. Yeah. I feel like this whole cast was worthwhile because there's been a lot of personal growth tonight.
Yeah. All right. Well,
this is why I don't have to go to therapy.
Yep.
This is my third therapy session of the week. Okay, so moving on, we have a prank on a sports show going terribly wrong when one of the commentators isn't quite up on the latest news. Steve, how'd you feel about the blitz?
It's definitely a real cringe fest when anybody walks in to a conversation with the wrong energy, and this is definitely done to a large degree in this context, but it's just so great. I think Bill Burr was a great host to sell the discomfort of being in this position. I mean, it doesn't get much whiter than a ginger Boston guy. It's easy to feel bad when you're not as up on the latest transgression or injustice that you should be angry about.
This one was fun again. I didn't feel like it really heightened as far as it maybe could have. But I also think that maybe it's just because I just have no strong feelings because this sketch isn't for me. It's designed for someone else and the things that they like and their sense of humor, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with it. I had fun with it, but I have no super strong feelings either way. So there's that.
It's a hot take. I'm not too far off from you, actually. I feel like we've seen better versions of this in the past. The live broadcast version also had some hard camera cuts because Bill Burr was hanging on a line and nobody was catching him. So there was some dead space there that they chopped out of the rebroadcast. So this isn't, the high point of the night. It is a fun idea that, this guy came in to do his job, and these sports shows are meant to be high energy and it's all about banter. And, like every week before we do our show, I send you guys a text and I'm like, this week, we're going to high energy and we're really going to like sell it. We're going to be on, like he came in to do what he's supposed to do, which is to just keep things light and fun. And he's just trying to do his job and he can't catch a break because, of dire things going on in the world. And so there's some sympathy as he's kind of getting raked over the coals and he's just this, well-intentioned doof. So there's some fun to be had there, but some production niggles. Generally speaking, I thought that the scenario where, it was a police shooting that led to the somber tone of everyone else on the panel. I mean, that's a heavy thing to hang on a comedy sketch right out of the gate. So I wonder if, maybe that wasn't helping me invest in the sketch as much, because obviously that's a very serious issue going on in society, and I know that's what they were looking for, but it was just kind of an abrupt thing they dropped in there right at the beginning, and I wasn't quite sure how to take that. So there was a few little things in this that I just felt didn't quite gel the way that they should. And as much as Bill Burr really tried to sell his role, I just didn't feel it was the strongest run at this sort of a sketch that we've seen, and kind of a rough out where all of a sudden, at the end, he feels like he got one up on Keenan because Keenan does welch on the check. Like that's, I don't know. That wasn't, the greatest capper ever. So not one for the books, but like most stuff, a little bit of fun to be had there.
True.
Yeah. Firmly middle of the road on that one.
Sure. Yep.
All right. Well, up next, we have a faux woke B-list actor getting scolded for his Instagram virtue signaling by none other than Jason Momoa and everyone else in his life.
Mm-hmm.
John, how'd you feel about it?
I feel that Jason Momoa is probably going to be hosting at some point very soon.
He seemed to love it when he hosted, and I think
Not only
everybody
that,
loved having him
yeah,
there.
It seems like every time someone picks up the phone and says, "Hey, you want to stop by and have a bit part in some sketch," he's always game. And this is obviously something he could do over his phone. I don't think he came into the studio for any of this, but generally speaking, I think he wants to be a friend of the show, and I think he's like right on the verge of being kind of one of their trusted go-to New York people that can kind of pinch hit. So I think we're gonna see more of Jason Momoa. It's hard to not like that guy. So that was fun. And the sketch overall, when it started, I was so ready to shut off the TV. I'm like, SNL, I get it. I get how we're feeling, right? Serious times, but this is a little too overt. And I'm like, I really hope there's a joke in here, because if this is just, let's give Beck, one of his irredeemable characters and have him do a really heavy-handed ballad, anti-Trump ballad. I thought, okay, that just feels too far. So I was really glad when the song cut and they get to reality and you realize the gag of the sketch is that, as much as I felt like this was just something that character needed to shut down before he ever hit post, everyone else in that world agrees with me. And I really, really kind of like that. I like Beck not being able to catch a break from anyone, the least of which Jason Momoa. So this was a sketch that when it turned, I started to enjoy it a lot more than when I thought that maybe this was like, a little bit more than I was looking for politics wise.
Interesting, because even before it took that turn, if it had just ended when he finished the video, I still fully got that the joke was, this is so cringy because it's just too much.
Yeah. And they set that up that this is not Beck singing. This is Jules, or,
I got
one
a
of
big
his
Jules vibe.
Yeah. One of his many irredeemable characters that just, you want to punch for all the right reasons. So I got that, but I kind of felt like, wait a minute, is this them finding a thinly veiled character to say some things that they actually want to say? Because the lyrics themselves were like, it was a pretty good anti-Trump rant as far as how they structured the lyrics. Like the song itself could pass as like a legitimate critique. And I thought maybe, just maybe, the show was doing a very thinly veiled thing to get out some of their views on where we're at in politics. And if that was the height of it, I would have felt like that was too heavy-handed. But
okay, yeah, that's fair.
Yeah.
Yeah. This one again was sort of middle of the road for me. I liked it. It was there. Nothing wrong with it. Didn't knock my socks off. Didn't hate it. It existed.
Steve, did you love it?
The only thing they got right was the TikTok video itself. They wanted to make something very bad. Something that just was like, it made your eyes roll. It was painful to watch. You had secondhand embarrassment for this guy. Made you dislike him immediately. It was great. Once that was over and it just became a rehash of the Pepsi commercial sketch, I was just like, okay, we've seen this before and it was done a lot better then. And even revisiting, even if it was just as good as the Pepsi commercial sketch, the whole repetitive nature of that joke does not work a second time, because what was working for me when they did it the first time was that I hadn't seen it before. So that repetitive uh, aspect was being revealed to me in real time. And that makes you face palm and that makes you go, oh my God, he can't catch a break. But when you realize what they're doing, like right away, when you recognize it and you know how it's going to play out, then it's just a drag. It's a chore. So it just didn't work for me. It was not something I think that is able to be revisited. And I think uh, this was just not a very inspired piece. So
I think that's a
not
very fair critique. That's
Yeah.
solid. That's A+ material there, Steve.
that is yeah. And I hate to be so negative. You might as well do the trumpet and zoom in on me right now. But that's just how I feel.
Another thing that took me out a little bit was I started to wonder, now hold on, is this a real guy?
Mm.
And so like I ended up Googling that. I don't think it is, but I'm still not totally convinced.
He's a real type for sure.
Yeah.
Yes, for sure.
This is one that I'm more than happy to leave in the, dustbin of middle of the road sketches.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, then let's do that. Just that, and we'll get into our musical performances from Jack White, where he performed a medley of Ball and Biscuit, Don't Hurt Yourself, and Jesus is Coming Soon. And then later in the show, Lazaretto. Real quick, before we fully talk about Jack White, I just want it to be known that all three of us play drums. So everyone needs to give their 5-second take on why on earth you would set up a drum set like that. Steve, go.
Yeah, I get everybody's got like a different setup that works for them, but I just can't wrap my head around someone who has that setup work for them. Like,
Fully insane.
yeah, like imagine being that guy, like, okay, I want to play drums, but like, I want to be able
to like not reach my toms.
yeah, like
that would
I want to
really
have to
dope.
stand up and hunch over to like do a roll on my rack tom.
Yeah, I really love to accidentally hit the rims.
Yeah, like if my wrists are cracking, that's when I'm in the right position to play some floor tom fills. So
I thought he was fine enough. Like the interesting thing about Jack White and the kind of trios that he creates is everyone uses their instrument very sparsely, but the finished product is very rich for some reason.
Mhm.
And I felt like this drummer, as odd as it was to see a kit laid out like that, I think there was some merit to what he was doing, especially with the big floor tom that he was basically using as his second rack tom. I liked the sound that he was getting off that. It was just beefier and just stronger, and it just had a bit more power to accent what Jack White was doing. So I kind of was getting that, why everything was like angled away from him. And, like I get some drummers, they like to be high on their throne and they like to basically, half stand up when they're really like eagling their crashes or something. Like I understand that there's room for a really animated drum performance. It works for him. So I'll leave it at that.
There's that.
It worked for him. I like the sound he was getting off it. It was fun to watch because it's not a setup and a performance style that you see a lot. So I was really intrigued by it, but it felt a little exhausting to watch it because I know that I don't have the abs to be up and hunched over my drums that long to be able to do that. So yeah, it's definitely not how I would do it, but still in a way for Jack White, it seemed kind of fun and in a weird way, a little fitting. So I was amused by it, if nothing else.
Yeah. I will say his snare sounded incredible.
Oh yeah. Like it was 18 inches. Like that was a big snare.
Yeah. Loved that.
Yeah.
All right. So Jack White proper. Steve, what'd you think?
it was pretty great. If I'm not mistaken, that first song sounded like it was directly about COVID. Is is that confirmed?
I've To be honest, I've never heard 2 of those 3 songs that he kind of medleyed together, but I did see some stuff referencing maybe some rewrites to it. So,
Yeah, because I was like, huh, this sounds like a song written about COVID. But aside from uh, the topic of the songs, it was nice to see a more stripped down 3-piece. We saw a very large band from him the last time, and that's the thing about Jack White is that we've seen him in many contexts where his style still comes through. Like it's still undeniably Jack White, but just his support system, dramatically changes. And I think he has a really great sense of arrangement.
Jack White is such an insanely talented guy. Like you said, Steve, just got a crazy knack for arrangements. Like there's one Raconteur song that changes time signatures like 20 times. Just crazy stuff that's really cool and really fun to listen to. Um, and these performances were good. He gave us he brought kind of a rock and roll back to SNL. Got some blazing guitar solos in there. And I had fun with it. That said, Jack White's solo stuff doesn't always stick with me. And then like sort of the distortion on his voice, which I get is a stylistic choice, made I couldn't understand the words a lot of the time, which took away from it a little bit. But overall, he's a hell of a performer.
Mhm. I like my blues crunchy. I don't mind,
Yeah.
a little bit more fuzz in the mix there.
Mhm.
My other thought on the drummer and his choice for, his size of drums and,
I gave you
how he had
5 seconds, sir.
that's all I need is I was getting kind of like a marching band vibe from it because it seemed like every drum was so big that there was just something a little more resonant about it. And I thought that was just kind of a nice thing to pair with what Jack White was doing. These performances were great. Like solid blues rocky stuff there in the first performance. I always dig that. I always feel like there's something maybe a little Zeppelin-esque in how pulled back they can be. And just how rich the final product is. So I was really digging that first performance. The second one I loved as well. Just cuz also solid. This was good stuff. This, if you need a musical guest, you could do a lot worse than Jack White in a pinch. And I love that he showed up and said, "Yeah, I can bring my blue lights and we'll lay a couple songs down for you." And man, if he can't fill that space, nice.
Yeah, I'll take this over Morgan Wallen
Yeah,
20
see,
times out of 10.
I didn't know Morgan Wallen coming into this show, and I still don't know Morgan Wallen, and I think that very well may just be how the story ends on that. So, I'm not feeling any loss getting Jack White this week.
No.
Yeah.
Definitely not.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, are we ready to tackle Weekend Update?
Let's do it.
Okay.
All right. For their lead in, Jost and Che pull absolutely no punches on Trump's miraculous COVID recovery. Steve, did you like Weekend Update this week?
I did. And it's amazing just, how close they can get to saying it without saying it, without actually saying the words, I hope Trump dies of COVID. They are dancing around that and making some great comedy. Like especially Che. Oh, the drunk driver surviving the crash is that's gonna stick with me. And
that was my favorite joke.
Yeah, I may steal that for family dinners. when the topic
will be a memorable Thanksgiving dinner at the Thin House.
Oh yes, yeah, you're all invited to witness. But it was very poignant, and it was very on fleek with what everybody is feeling right now. I think, regardless of
more or less.
Yeah, it's it's a weird time, and it's
definitely not every era that you can openly joke about being cool with the president dying, and a decent number of people being on board with it.
I gotta say, Che with the really whoa, he went there type jokes about, impregnating people's daughters and making people flip on abortion for that. I was just very happy with the material. I think that's what I'm trying to say in far too many words.
Che was on his A game last night for sure. I mean, he was just knocking them off. He was delivering them, and I love it when the crowd in studio goes, "Oh!" and he's like, "What?" Like that's like
Yeah.
my favorite Che reaction. And yeah, I mean, I thought the material was really good. Jost as well had some good material, but Che was really standing out this week.
Yeah, last week I said I feel like there's some premiere jitters, like they just kind of gotta find their groove a little bit. And I was just hoping, just give me a slow and steady improvement week over week till we're ramped back up to where we left things off before COVID. And I feel like, they made serious strides in their performance this week. The material was sharper. The punchlines were punchier, they were willing to land some jokes that are far more polarizing. Like it didn't feel like they were pulling any punches or holding back. Yeah, it was vicious and it was uh energetic and
Mhm.
their back and forth was good. It had, it had teeth. Uh
Yeah.
Whether you agree with what they're saying or not, you got to admit that it was well delivered and that they knew where they were taking this material and the jokes they wanted to land, and I think they landed them all just marvelously. So,
Yeah.
surprisingly tight performance from Jost and Che this week.
All right. High marks.
Mhm.
Let's get into our first feature, which was an introduction to Dr. We Notice, Kate's 2020 coping mechanism. And I think we can guess how I felt about it, but I'll let John go first.
I think this was fun. Like sometimes all you got to do is just give Kate a wig and say, go be funny. And she can go be funny. I do love how comfortable the back and forth with Jost is and how, just
Mhm.
playful she can be. I know that the little breakdown there where she kind of breaks character and explains really what's at the heart of this character and, Joe setting her up to be able to give that little diatribe. I know that that's all, rehearsed, but
Mhm.
darn it all if it didn't play sincere. So I think
Yeah.
the real marks in this isn't for the character, though the character's fun enough. It's obviously, one joke kind of thing, but just the performance, the naturalness with which her and Jost brought that character to a head, I think is worth noting because that
Hmm.
it felt just very fun and playful and organic, and that's nice to
Hmm.
see.
We notice.
We notice.
Yeah, I thought this was a fun even before the turn, I thought this was a fun character that I was
Mhm.
enjoying and, having a good time with, and I wouldn't have hated to see several more times, and then it took that turn that then brought it into a whole new realm.
Mhm.
Um, and they sold it so well. I mean, there was a solid 15, 30 seconds where I was like, "Wait, is this supposed to happen?"
Yeah, is she
Yeah.
cashing out of this on screen? Like, is this an SNL moment? But
Yeah,
no, it's
like, I
just
mean,
really, really good performance.
yeah, I genuinely wasn't sure.
Mhm.
And a lot of times in those situations, the anchor is the one that gives it away because, like,
Right.
Colin isn't an actor, but he sold
Right.
this one really well. And oh man, words can't describe how much I loved it. Totally. I know earlier I said some controversial things about Kate McKinnon, but then here we are now. A perfect Weekend Update appearance as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, it was fun. It was adorable.
Yeah, Steve.
Well, first of all, I would like to consider Colin Jost an actor. I mean, he played a policeman in his own movie. He
Okay.
gave himself a role.
Okay.
Uh,
Being in a movie doesn't necessarily mean you're okay.
fair enough. As for Doctor We Notice, I felt myself uh, hearkening back to a couple of different eras of SNL. I felt like the character, the simplicity of it, and just
Mm.
Mhm.
the very on the nose nature of it was original cast, like 1970s
Mhm.
era uh, Weekend Update. Like I could see Gilda Radner taking this and
Yep.
really doing some magic stuff with it. And I think that was my tip off because I felt like this is a little too simple, and there's hardly anything to this other than, this pun. It's a
Mhm.
name that sounds like we know this, and it sounds like they're just milking that over and over. This is a little bit uncharacteristic of a professional comedy writer to embellish. And then the reveal came. So I was like, "Oh yeah, okay."
Yeah, so it was Dresden and Gates wrote this.
Mhm.
And we know that Dresden and Gates love to work with Kate, right? And it did feel to me like this was maybe something that Kate actually does in her real life.
Mhm.
Like I would
Yeah.
not be surprised if they were like, "Yeah, we just noticed Kate said we notice a lot, so we made it into this." And I loved that sort of somewhat organic, just fun, light feeling about it.
Mhm.
So like it's kind of interesting that that sort of tipped you off, Steve, and like you knew something was afoot because I was picking up that like this is different than what we're usually getting, but I was just like excited because I was like, oh, they're gonna do this now. You know, we can have a really simple character. I'm glad this made it on the show. Um, so yeah, I loved it.
Yeah. It's a hard one to sum up, right? Like when it's kinda
Yeah,
it devolves on purpose, like how do you quantify that? But yeah, the end result was charming and fun. So
yeah.
definitely I think we're all saying this was a win.
Oh yeah, big time.
Yeah.
All right. Well, next up, we had Pete on to talk about J.K. Rowling's transphobic comments and his regrettable tattoos. Steve, did you like Pete's feature?
Uh, I was happy to see Pete. I would have liked him to come out with something a little bit, just a little bit more inspired. I feel like he was pressured to have some material on so he could kind of cash in on the synergy of his movie and Bill Burr's involvement with that. And obviously there were references to that. I just felt like, if it wasn't for his great delivery, like a lot of this material was just not his best. I think he delivered it in a way that got the only laugh you can out of it. But there was a lot of material like that where it was just Pete trying to get stuff on paper and was kind of struggling with it, but made something he could kind of work with his style of delivery.
You know, I think that's really all that can be said about it for
Mm.
me. I'm just going to say I firmly agree with Steve. It felt a little forced, wasn't great. John, how'd you feel?
That's a big ditto from John. Yeah, lightweight material, little half baked. Pete does a good job delivering, but yeah, this is not a standout Pete performance. We've had some really really fun, hard hitting stuff from Pete. Sometimes
Hmm.
he goes into uncharted territory on trying to goof on mental illness, which he's very personally acquainted with that subject. Sometimes he's railing against pedophiles in the Catholic Church, right? Like he's run the gamut of hard hitting Weekend Update parts. This wasn't one
Hmm.
of them. So
Nope.
yeah, I mean they obviously needed something to pad out Weekend Update, but yeah, I could have done without it.
All right. Well, let's move into to some stuff we maybe like a little better.
Sure.
Our next up, the mob has become a lot more PC while Don Pauly was away.
Forget about it. I think somebody's been doing a Sopranos rewatch.
Hmm.
It definitely reminded me of uh, back in university, watching The Sopranos and finding a lot of interest in them exploring kind of the whole traditional way of thinking in Italian culture and in the mob. That was always a big thing on that show is how they felt about uh, homosexuality and all that. So yeah, the mob has always been known to be a little bit behind the times when it comes to progressivism. So it was, yeah,
Yeah,
It's
sure.
not the
Okay.
core.
otherwise
It's not the
pillars
core
of
tenet of their organization.
yeah,
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
So that's what I found funny is they're probably the last group of people to hop on that train. So it's just silly to see them fully embrace it. I think it was a pretty clever idea to explore. And, it wasn't groundbreaking or anything, but it was a very funny juxtaposition.
This was a fun idea.
Yeah.
I didn't think it was exceptionally well executed. Um, it's certainly an interesting thing to play with, people that you don't expect to feel this way, making them feel this way, right? Um, but it was a little slow. There weren't really any active moves until the very end. Um, so just there wasn't a lot there. It's another one that is just very firmly middle of the road that it's fine. I had some laughs. I didn't hate it. I'm not gonna share it with any of my friends though, yeah. John, how'd you feel?
I liked it. I wasn't overwhelmed with joy. An obvious but still fun starting point. Like obviously the mob, they're maybe the least woke culture you're going to find. So let's show what would happen if that kind of seeped into their culture and how it would basically neuter them as an organization, right? The mob can't function if they have compassion, right? Like just it doesn't work that way.
Right.
So very interesting. Very interesting. I thought Kyle died really well. I liked his dead face. It was nice to see Punky Johnson on screen. It was nice that as limp as it may have been, they did have an out. Like this
Yep.
did come to a head and there was a conclusion that made sense that felt like the right capper for it. So it had structurally some good stuff working for it, but you're absolutely right, Catherine. It just didn't get terribly exciting with what they did with the material. They covered all the obvious beats that you would expect if that's your premise. But yeah, it just didn't get quite as exciting as I would have expected a mob meets, you know, uh, woke culture sketch to be. So yeah, a little underwhelmed would be my takeaway too.
Yeah. All right. Well, maybe let's see if our last sketch of the night can bring up our spirits. Sam Adams samples their new Jacko pumpkin ale to real Bostonians. Steve, your thoughts?
Oh, yeah. It's another rehash. We can trace the roots of this back to the Dunkin' Donuts sketch with Casey Affleck. Uh, just really showcasing how out of place, the unpolished Bostonian would be in these wholesome type of commercials. But seeing Bill Burr in a Sam Adams parody, it just made me keep looking at the corner of the screen, waiting for Dave Chappelle to jump out dressed as Samuel L. Jackson, because because if y'all remember the Chappelle show, there was a Sam Adams parody in that as well, also featuring Bill Burr. So it's it was interesting to me because I was also thinking that the draft from the previous SNL episode with the wives in the bubble, that reminded me of another Chappelle sketch where they used the draft as a basis for a sketch in that, also featuring Bill Burr, might I add.
So somebody is doing a
Somebody's doing a
Sopranos rewatch and a Chappelle Show rewatch.
Yeah,
That's
maybe
our
the
grand
same
takeaway?
person,
Yeah.
or one's doing one and another's doing
Sure.
another. But yeah, as for the sketch, I thought it was fun. It was great to see Mikey as the son. That whole dynamic, I think, is what was the saving grace of this. It was kind of funny to see that masculinity, that should we say toxic masculinity? Is this what
Yes.
this is? You're the man now. Is this the day you're gonna punch your father? Like that's
That's a great line.
like it's so, yeah, and it's so problematic, and like you feel bad for laughing at it, but it's just, it's just the fact that it doesn't belong in such a family friendly, well intentioned commercial. So
Mm.
Yeah.
yeah, maybe like a lot of other sketches, not getting a whole lot of points for originality, maybe a bit of a rehash from things we've seen. But the execution does offer some things to enjoy.
I found this one pretty enjoyable. I love anytime someone comes on and they're just willing to really like rag on where they're from. I'm here for it. I love to hear good Philly jokes. I love to hear good Boston jokes. I love to hear good LA jokes. Do not joke about New York City. No. uh, yeah, I mean, just that whole concept, I'm already on board with it, making fun of the caricatures of the people from the region, and of course, Bill sold it really well. And then that, like you said, that dynamic with Mikey is what really took it to the next level for me. That was hilarious. So yeah, this one was just a good time. I had fun with it.
Yeah.
Yeah, this was a high point of the night for me personally.
Mhm.
I thought it was very well executed. I thought about the Casey Affleck Duncan one like you, Steve, but I didn't feel it was really that much of a rehash. Like it was original, like the characters themselves, the father-son dynamic, and just the way they staged the commercial and the tone of it, and the voiceover and everything. It had enough unique qualities that I didn't feel like they were really just, retreading something we've seen exactly the same before. So I didn't knock it for that. But the moment when the son is cowed, walks away, but then throws the Lucky Charms at the dad and it bursts open, and you realize all hell's going to break loose at this point because you can't, you can't try to one up a Bostonian in that situation, right? Like now his pride has been, challenged, and that it's just going to come to blows. So that was, I burst out laughing at that moment. I was like, yes, that's exactly what we needed to see in this very polished commercial presentation. So yeah, everything about this I thought was well conceived and well executed, and the perfect vehicle for Bill Burr. So hey,
Yeah.
I was really, really good on this one.
I also loved the fully unexplained cast on his hand.
Yeah, and they had to blur.
Expected.
They had to blur out some of the comments that people had written on his cast, because obviously, racist or sexist or something that wasn't going to be family friendly for the commercial. So yeah, that was a fun little touch that they actually had time to blur some of the things on the cast.
I love how they just censor his cast, but don't think to just edit him out completely. From like, how little footage did they get that they still had to have him in it?
Right. And him pulverizing his kid makes the cut. Yeah. You can't think too hard about it, but it sure was a fun moment. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, that is the end of our rundown.
Let's
get into our overall thoughts. Yeah, truly. We'll start with moment of the night. John, how about you go first?
You know what? I'm going to give it to one of Che's jokes. I think it's either Che impregnating the daughters of important white people, or it's Che not reveling in Trump potentially dying.
President Trump claimed to have survived the coronavirus. Yay. I'm not going to say I'm disappointed, but it kind of feels like when there's a car crash and the only survivor is the drunk driver.
It's one of those two. But just to, the overall idea here is that I think Che had some really solid zingers in their opening salvo. So my moment is when Che got his moment to really, land a couple serious blows there. Yeah, that'll take it for me.
All right. I'm going to give it to
Kate. Are you okay?
I'm obviously not.
that turn in there. Oh man, I loved it. And like we touched on, they sold it so well. I genuinely wasn't sure if it was scripted. Just so funny. Steve?
I'm going to give it to the cereal fight.
Oh, you gonna take a swing at me? Is today the day? Huh? Today the day you take a swing at your old man? Is that what it is? Come on, you a man now? I didn't think so.
This was a really fun moment. I enjoyed it and thought, this was probably the most raw thing we saw on the show. This was only funny in the context that it was presented in. Like if you saw this in your supermarket, you'd probably call the police. Uh, but I think the fact that it was just, so ultra realistic in its portrayal that it kind of flipped over to comedy territory.
Interesting. Well, I think I'm probably know where this is going to go then. Steve, what do you think the best sketch was?
Best sketch. I mean, I had my problems with it, but Sam Adams, I think, would be probably the sketch of the night, even if Dunkin' Donuts might have taken some of the originality out of it. But, it's not like SNL invented making fun of people from Boston. So,
John, what was your best sketch?
Maybe predictable, but I'm gonna go with Jost and Che's opening salvo. I thought they performed the heck out of that material. It was biting, and it was just such a marked improvement over what they did last week that I really gotta applaud, them catching their stride this early in the season. And I just hope we get a lot more of it.
Yeah. I'm going to give it to Dr. We Notice.
Yeah.
I know that you're not shocked.
Mhm.
That was not to totally give away the ranking, but I mean, that's what saved the episode for me. Everything else to me was middle of the road. And that delighted me. So yeah. Steve, who's your MVP?
Oh, MVP. I think Bill Burr, with his great monologue and his performances in Sam Adams and the Blitz. I think he showed a lot of comedic range that I knew he had it because I'm a big Bill Burr fan, and I didn't really have to rack my brain to think about how Bill Burr would work in SNL because I really did see a lot of potential there. And, you know, due to my complete lack of surprise, he pulled it off and did a really great job.
Good.
Bill was definitely a far more present host than Chris Rock ended up being.
Mhm.
I don't know
That's true.
what the reasoning was, if maybe, I think we had more live sketches, so that might have something to do with it.
Mhm.
But he was definitely in there a lot, so I think that's a very fair call to give it to him, and he did good with what he had. You're gonna be shocked, but I'm gonna give it to Kate. Because like I said, Doctor We Notice killed me, and even in that sketch, the new normal sketch, where I said I would be fine with you replacing her, she at the same time was the highlight of it for me.
Mhm.
So I need to go back to therapy to figure out what's going on with that. But yeah, so I think she was there and she was really selling the material that she had. And yeah, I just having fun with Kate tonight. So, John,
Maya Rudolph.
Oh,
Her Kamala Harris is super dialed in now. It's the most potent impression we have on the show right now. Honestly, I think she's upstaging Kerry as Biden. He's a big presence, but
Yeah.
I'm not left thinking at all about what he brought to the screen compared to what I was, picking up from what Maya was doing. You said you like a good Philly joke, Catherine. She had a little
Oh,
run
yeah,
there in
that
the
one
middle.
was great.
She puts on her best Philly accent. She drops the Wawa reference. I'm sold. For her to be able to jump into that and that be, just executed flawlessly and then jump right back into Kamala. Maya always impressed me when she was on the show, but she's gotten better with age. She's just such a seasoned, more confident performer. Yeah, it's just nice to see. She never really got the show or the vehicle that like made her a household name the way that maybe like Tina Fey did or Amy Poehler did from her era. And she tried so many different things, like Lorne Michaels was confident enough to give her own show with Martin Short. And, she had a sitcom, about, they had a baby or something, remember, with Will Arnett. Like she'd been in a bunch of stuff, but she never just really got that one thing that you associate with Maya Rudolph the way that you do some other performers from that era.
Yeah.
So I just love that she still continues to show that it wasn't for any lack of talent. It's just sometimes the vehicles don't happen, but she's just always impressive. So she only had one sketch tonight, but darn it all, if I don't think she delivered.
Yeah, Kamala is definitely outshining Biden
I think so.
in the
Yeah.
SNL universe for sure. So let's rate the whole show on a scale of classic, great, decent, weak, or train wreck. How would you rate this episode?
This was a big step forward from the premiere. It had a lot of middling material, but I think it gained some steam in the back half. I think Weekend Update really kind of put some wind in the sails. And I definitely like the material in the back half. I like the musical guest. We had a way more bonkers cold open than last week. So even if it wasn't even or, structurally sound, it certainly was more interesting to watch, the places that they went with the fly and all that. So, and I thought the monologue was more inspired than last week. So this had a lot more working for it than last week. If it wasn't just for some very middle of the road live sketch fare, I think we may have been flirting with a great episode, but as it stands, it was just uneven enough for me to think, yeah, no, this settles out in the decent range.
Yeah, I thought this one was definitely way better than the premiere, but still, just by definition of how I ranked every sketch, a decent episode.
Yeah.
There was nothing to get it above that for me.
Yep.
Steve?
Yeah. So from the previous week's episode, John's gone from a weak to a decent. And I was giving it a decent last week, but I think I jumped the same distance as John did. John was leaning on the fence with his weak rating. I've kind of switched to leaning on the other fence on the better side of decent. Now I'm getting closer to giving these episodes a great. So I am progressing, even though my rating is remaining at a decent. It's a decent plus as opposed to a decent minus. So yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree. Like it had some things that definitely bring it higher up in that decent category. Like, regardless of my feelings on it, it had a strong monologue. It had a very strong Weekend Update with at least one very good feature. Everything else was so middle of the road for me that I can't give it above decent.
Yeah, that's exactly right. It definitely reached greater heights than last week, but we still don't have like a really even solid episode that you can just say is an unequivocal win. So yeah, I think we're all saying the same thing. Yeah. It's progress.
There we go. Well, that's a wrap. Thanks to Steve Finn and John Murray. And thanks as well to our most generous patrons, Sam Bowers, Neil Weinstein, Justin Gardner, Carissa Eubank, and Brian Clark. If you're enjoying our show, please subscribe on YouTube or wherever better podcasts can be found. Your subscription helps us grow, and your support is greatly appreciated. We'll be back in 1 week when SNL returns with first-time host Issa Rae and musical guest Justin Bieber. But until then, this has been episode number 117 of the Saturday Night Live Afterparty podcast. I'm Catherine Coleman. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it.